streaming baptism services. And so it's anyway, I'm still old-fashioned about it, I guess. Anyway, so welcome everybody. My name is Mike Fox. BYU Idaho likes us to go by Brother Fox, or but if you call me Mike, I won't get offended. I anyway, it seems strange. Like in seminary, when you're like the adult teacher and you're teaching kids, it's like it makes sense that they kind of use a term of. But when we're a lot of people in this class, we're all about the same age. So I mean, we run from 20 to probably 60, and we're all somewhere in there. So I'm not too worried about titles, I guess, is what I'm saying. Anyway. So welcome. So in this first meeting, I just like to give a little bit of a tour of how the class is set up. There's a few little features that people often miss and don't see as opportunities for learning, and then go over to a little brief overview of some of the content from this week's chapter, and then take your questions. And they can be questions from a homework assignment. Like, I'm not opposed to working out a problem or something on here if anybody ever needs us to, or the quizzes. Recognize that the quizzes are open book. You can take those using resources. I think a lot of people don't realize that. You can take them, I think, up to 3 times.
That's exciting news, because the syllabus says close book, close everything. So
well, the exams are closed everything, but not the quizzes. So that's, and anyway, and we could talk about exams too if anybody has questions about them. Anyway, so I'll sort of, and honestly, so the way, I'm sure by now everybody is, had plenty of Zoom experience. Zoom's like not very good. In a regular meeting, we could talk and you could put your hand up or whatever, and I could recognize you. Honestly, in Zoom, if you're comfortable just sort of breaking in there and interrupting me, again, I won't be offended. I think that's, we just, if you have a question, sometimes it's best to address it, sooner rather than later. And then some people are super uncomfortable doing that at all. And so I do have my chat window open, so you can go into the Zoom chat and ask questions there. And that's nice, because that does allow me to sort of answer each question as we go. So don't be afraid to jump in if you have a question, either by voice or by chat. Anyway, so a couple things I just wanted to show you. I use the announcements pretty regularly, and so if you're not checking the announcements, you probably are missing important information from me. The homepage always has the last couple announcements, but of course you can click on the announcements link, and it will take you to, you can see further back if you need to. I check here. I try to respond to student questions in the announcements. There's a weekly announcement that's just like a welcome to this week, and it lays out everything to expect for that week. Those are actually something I've put in advance, so they'll just pop up each week. But then usually once or twice a week in between that, I'm posting other information, and it'll be less as we go on, and there's, you're more comfortable with how the course is set up. But like the one this week about not freaking out when you go halfway through your assignment and then decide you're going to work on it later, and you come back and it looks like you have an F. You don't really, it just updates the grade each time. So I've tried to put stuff like that so that you can find it. So in my weekly welcome announcement, I give you a list of everything that's going to be due that week. And then down here under other news, there's a link to this additional study content, and I'll also show you where you can find this link in the modules. So this is content that I have sort of put together over years of teaching this class. So it's different than necessarily the stuff that the textbook provides. Some people think it's valuable. Some people think, geez, the book already provides so much stuff, I don't need another thing to look at. So it's there for you if you want it, if it'll be valuable to you. The link to this class meeting is here. If you're new, sometimes people are like, I don't know how to get to the class meeting. It's the same link you used today, will be the same all the way through. but the link is here. I know this link looks different, but it's because it's the generic number one versus the personalized one with my name, but either link will work. And then just another additional information. So that's kind of the announcements and why it's important to check them out regularly. I'm always surprised that we'll be 2/3 of the way through the class and people will be like, whoa, wait, there was other study content I could use? I didn't know that. And so it's there each week, but the thing is, these become sort of rote after a while and people just stop reading them because more announcements. And all right, the homework support sign up that you're working on this week, I think it explains it pretty well in the instructions, but what I want you to know about it is what you're signing up for is twice during the semester, you will be making a video presentation of you working out one of the homework assignments. Some people will just go straight into Wily Plus and work it out there and record it and sort of narrate their process of going through it. Other people like to set up really nice Excel spreadsheets that sort of mimic the problem. There's no minimum expectation of you having to know Excel enough to do that. You can do it in a way that works for you. Some people don't feel comfortable with screen capture software, so they honestly, I've seen somebody who's recorded it on their phone while they work it out on a whiteboard, and all of those are acceptable. This is one of those assignments that if you do it and make a good effort, you get full credit. I'm not gonna grade your presentation skills or anything like that. What I found though is almost everybody sort of hates the idea of having to present to everyone, and yet since they instituted this homework support assignment, it's been probably what I think is one of the most valuable resources for students. First, having to do it really forces you to dig deeply into the material, and then seeing how one of your classmates just explains the problem is really valuable. So grin and bear it and do your best on it, and it's actually pretty profitable and pretty valuable for people. So I mentioned that in addition to finding a link to the additional study materials I told you about in the announcement, you can also find it in the modules. So I'm not sure why the course designer set the course up this way. Just so you know, at BYUI, the teachers we don't create our own courses. They're created by a central course designer so that they're consistent. Whereas the other school in Arizona, where I teach full-time, we have a lot more content control. Anyway, so when you go to modules, all the way at the end of it, so you scroll down past all of the weekly modules, there is this student resources section, and it's all the way at the end, so people miss it all the time and don't realize it's there. In here, I've added a link to the class meeting schedule, the same one I posted in an announcement, but as the announcements get pushed off, people go, wait a minute, what was the meeting schedule? So there's a link to that there. There's also a link to my additional study content, and then a link to a bunch of other things. I mean, including devotionals. When you go to your homework support, here's a link on how to embed a video and a discussion post. So just, I guess, be aware that all these resources are down here at the bottom of the modules page, because again, people miss them. The additional study content, I'll click it to show you what it is. It's honestly just a Google Doc page where I've put a bunch of links. So for each chapter, there's a lecture video. This is honestly a lecture video. I didn't do special for BYU Idaho. I captured it from a class I teach here in Arizona face-to-face, but it's the same content. There's a self-test and an additional self-test. This is content from Wily from the previous edition of the book. And the reason I include these is because the wording of these tests feels almost exactly like the wording of the exams. And so a lot of people have told me that it's been valuable to them in preparation for the exam, because the exams feel really different than the homework assignments. The homework assignments are more like, I don't know, they're more like situation-based. You'll notice that, where they're trying to give you some sort of example of real accounting. And the exams are like multiple choice about accounting situations. And again, not something I created and not my preference, but it's how it's set up. So these self-tests and additional self-tests, they mimic the exam. They're a lot more like the exam. There's also sometimes videos of me working out like a B version of some of the homework problems, like a similar problem to it, and a quick review of the chapter that's usually 5 to 10 minutes max that some people find helpful. And then, just additional resources I picked up over the years. Anyway, so that's there for you. That's the additional study content. You can find a link to that in the weekly announcement or by scrolling all the way down to the bottom of the modules to the student resources. All right, getting sick of this long-winded explanation of the course yet. The second, or the fourth thing on my list of things to cover is this week's assignment that's called, where is it at? Paper: article. All you're doing for this, you're not writing a paper. You do not have to write a paper this week. All you have to do is submit a citation for an article that you are going to, that you will be writing a paper about later in the semester. And just so you know, don't worry too much about this paper. It's like 1 to 2 pages, and I'm not an English teacher. So I'm not going to grade the English in it too hard. Anyway, but what you need to know is, right, so a lot of people miss this. So you click on paper article, and then it says refer to paper introduction for instructions. So you have to click on that. And then it's going to tell you for article, all you have to do is find an article, but it has to be from a professional journal. People often submit things from newspapers or periodicals. It has to be from a professional journal. And you can use the McKay Library's e-journal finder, or you can find it in another place. Some people just Google search and find a professional journal article. Yeah, let's see. The other thing you need to know is that your article has to be from the most recent 10 years. So you can't do something older than 10 years old. The intent is that you're going to find a topic that interests you related to your career field. It does not have to be related to accounting. I recognize out of 50 people in this course, only 5 of them are actually thinking of becoming accountants. The rest are business majors who have to take accounting, or entrepreneurship, or several other majors, right? So anyway, so I just want to point that out, because those are areas where people, then they submit it to me and I have to send it back to them and say, oh, it's more than 10 years old, and they have to find a new one, and then they're mad at me. I'm used to it. I'm a dad. I have 8 kids, so people are always mad at me. Okay, extra credit in this course. So recognize that BYU Idaho really limits the amount of extra credit we're allowed to offer. In fact, we're only allowed to offer up to 1% of the total score for the course in this course. That's a directive from our accounting department. So nonetheless, I do offer extra credit, and it's in the form of, you'll see it in the weekly announcements. But if you go to the modules, every other week, there is a discussion. You'll find it at the bottom of the week's module. So for week 2, it's called Spiritual Book of Life. And this one, I have you listen to a talk that's really awesome, actually, by the director of accounting at the BYU Marriott School of Accounting, that really, I guess, considers some of the more spiritual aspects of what seems to be a very secular course of study in accounting. And then we just sort of reflect on it or share thoughts on it. And so each time you do that, I will mark it down as 10 points, but it can be confusing because the way the grades are set up in the system, it shows the extra credit is worth 0 points. And I have to do that because if I make it worth 1 point or 1% of the grade, then people who don't choose not to do the extra credit, it looks like it's hurting their grade. So it doesn't get added in till the end of the course. So if you participate in these every other week, and I would say even if there was no extra credit, they're good. They're just, I think it's nice to see the spiritual side of what we're doing. Anyway, if you participate in those in each week, then your final course grade will be bumped by 1%. And a lot of times for people, that's enough to bump them from, that B+ to that A-, or that or that D plus to that C minus, that not passing to that passing. So anyway, so just know that that extra credit is there each week, and I mention it in the weekly announcements. And then one last thing, this proctored exam practice, which is also part of week 2. This always freaks people out because they think it's an exam. It's not. It's an opportunity to make sure that Proctorio, which is our proctoring software, works with your computer. In order for Proctorio to work, you have to be using Google Chrome. I'm hoping at some point they'll move to, Chrome is becoming the old one, and Chromium is out now, but it uses Google Chrome with the Proctorio plugin installed. So going through that will help you make sure you're all set up so there's no surprises when you have to take your first exam. And then one other issue that I didn't have on my list, but that I've already received several emails about, Wily Plus uses Flash, and Flash is no longer supported by Adobe, its creator. And so you may have problems at time running content in Wily Plus, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's something we've gone back to Wily Plus, and we've tried to work out with them, and they're trying to adjust, but we're caught in the middle of Adobe no longer supporting Flash. Honestly, I think I'm being generous to Wily Plus. They knew that Flash was going to no longer be supported. They could have fixed this ahead of time. They didn't. In fact, I believe actually this is our last year using Wily Plus, and we'll be switching to a new provider because of some of these issues in the future. Anyway,
While
so
we're
there's
on
all.
Wily
Yes,
Plus, can I ask a question?
sure.
I'm not sure I'm doing it right, because it didn't ask me to register. It didn't ask me for any information. So I just clicked up on up at the top of mine where it above week 1 where it says Wily Plus read, study, and practice.
Right.
And it just opens something up there. I can't highlight or anything, so I've been having to take my own notes and copy and paste, which is fine. I do that anyway. But when I clicked on register, it just went to a page and said the link was broken, or the link
Yeah.
is no longer available, or something like that. So I didn't have to do anything, but now today homework is due,
Right.
and I'm wondering,
But
am I
you should
missing
have
something?
access. You should have access to the homework. Do you not?
I haven't tried yet. I'm
Oh,
not done
okay.
reading.
Yeah. So, and I tried to put that in the announcements. So last semester they piloted this idea of like auto enrolling in this online content, and then this semester they didn't provide any instruction to the instructors about what they did, and they still left the old register centric language in the module, and then we found out sort of after class had already started that they were doing this auto enroll. So all you had to do was click on Wily Plus and you'd be taken into it. That
Okay.
BYU is going to, don't shoot me for saying this, but is going to bill your student account for the cost of Wily Plus.
Well, and that's the email I got.
Right.
That I had been auto enrolled, but I didn't, like last semester we used a different book for
Right.
basic accounting, and I had to do some stuff, and it took me
Right.
to a different place to do everything. And so I'm just wondering, like, I'm afraid to like click on the homework before I'm ready to do it, because I'm always like kind of freaked out the first couple weeks of the semester. So I'm just not sure if I'm in the right spot.
Yeah, so you are. And so you've been auto enrolled. So the minute you clicked on a link that took you into any Wily material,
Okay.
you're now enrolled. And in fact, I can go into the gradebook and see everybody's names. They're all enrolled. And again, and so what that's done is it's created some panic for the students and created, how do I say it nicely, like headache for teachers, because we're getting tons of questions that we don't know answers to. And so,
Right.
but I think we've got it worked out. And, that's life, right? I mean, we have to adjust. But anyway, so that's there's an auto enroll. Once you click on Wily Plus material, you're in, and it's capturing it. I will say we have a known issue starting last semester when they were piloting auto enroll, where most people's grades are transferring over really great, but a few people's would like capture their first grade and then not update. So if you ever notice that your grade on a Wily Plus assignment doesn't match your Canvas grade, please let me know and we'll fix it. I try to keep an eye on it, but I've got 100 students in 2 sections, and I sometimes miss them. And I said, it's rare, but it's this weird issue. All right, I just saw someone had their hand up and then their name dropped off. It popped up for a second.
Check your BYU account, Michelle. And mine was automatically billed on my BYU account for the Wily Plus when I enrolled.
Yeah, I got the email that said I was automatically enrolled, and I mean, I can read the material. I just don't know if I just didn't know if that was what it was, or because like I said, last semester it took us to a whole different site. We didn't use Wily Plus. We used, I don't know, I blocked it from my memory because I hated it. But it was something completely different, and it took us to a completely different place. And so I'm just making
just check
sure.
if they charge, because they charged me automatically after I enrolled.
Okay. I'll try and find that.
But I can tell you, Michelle, I see you in the course, so that
Okay.
means something. All right, somebody had their hand up and I missed the name. It popped up and then it went down before I had a chance to acknowledge you.
Oh, okay. Oh, hi. Hello, everyone. Okay, it's me, Brother Fox. I think you were just touching on the work 2 where it says exam, protocol or something. When I click there, it's asking for the access code. So I'm not too sure if you are supposed to give us the access code or something, because you can't be able to access something, or I don't know, maybe something odd.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So when you go to do the practice exam, or what is it called? The exam, the right here, exam proctored practice. If it asks you, so when with Proctorio properly installed, you should not be requested to enter a password, because Proctorio will enter that exam key or password in for you. So if it's prompting you for a password, that means that you're either not using Chrome, or that if you are using Chrome, that the Proctorio plugin is not properly installed. And so typically just reinstalling the Proctorio plugin fixes that problem and you can go right in. If you've tried that, then the best I can do is I can give you a number, maybe I'll post that up for Proctorio support. And they're really great about getting people fixed, but you know, challenging if you're calling from not somewhere in North America, where just trying to figure out the time zone difference and call them at a time when you can reach them. So again, if you're being prompted to enter a password or a passcode for the exam, what that means is that your Proctorio plugin's not installed correctly.
Okay, I'll try to reinstall it again. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so I'm ready to sort of shift gears out of this general information portion of this meeting and more into a brief overview of the chapter 1 material. Does anybody have any questions about other things before I move into more, I guess, class topics-centric discussion? All right, hearing none, I shall move forward. So let's see, I've got a little PowerPoint, and I don't love PowerPoint, but in a setting like this, it might be our easiest way to cover some of this material. Let's see. All right. So I'm guessing a lot of you have already started into the material for this week. The first homework is due today. Recognize that as a pattern. There's always a homework due on the Thursday, and then a second homework due on Saturday that they do over and over. That's how they set up the course. So this first chapter sort of introduces you to financial statements. If you've had basic accounting or fundamentals of accounting or a course like that, this should be review for you. If you've never had accounting, which some of you may be in that boat, this may be brand new to you. So I'm just going to go over the basic financial statements and what they cover. And relatively quickly. So again, if I'm going too fast or you have questions, don't be afraid to just jump in and interrupt or throw them in the chat. Anyway, so this first financial statement is called an income statement. And the income statement summarizes a business or organization's revenues, that's money that they earn through selling goods or services, and their expenses. You'll notice the way the format of this is set up, that the revenues are listed at the top. That's always the case. And then the expenses are listed, usually in a separate column, and then subtotaled under total expenses. And then revenues minus expenses is going to be our net income. If our expenses exceed our revenues, meaning we spent more to run the business during that period than what we brought in through revenue, then our net income will be called a net loss. And it will be shown usually as a number in parentheses. So the parentheses in accounting means negative. Sometimes they put just a negative in front of it too, but the most common is in parentheses. Recognize that an income statement measures revenue and expenses over a period of time. So this one says for the month ended October 31st, 2017. That means all revenues earned during the month of October, less all expenses paid out, or incurred is probably the correct word, during the month. And then we're left with our net income. Sometimes you'll see net income listed
I
as
had a question on the income and on the income statement. How do you know? Because I know on the homework it says for the month of, or it gives you for the year of. So how do you know which one of those you're supposed to choose? Just because of the nature of the question?
Yeah. So I mean, here's one of the hard things about doing accounting in a class. You have to sort of like try to get context clues out of their question, right? As opposed to real life, if I'm doing an income statement for my business, I know exactly what period. I'm either doing it for the month or for the quarter or for the year. So the only thing where they might trick you on these is it might just say something like as of October 31st, 2017. And that wouldn't be correct because an income statement doesn't measure revenue and expenses as of a given day. It measures revenue and expenses over a period. So for a month, for a quarter, for a year. So to give you a more detailed answer, I'd have to see an example maybe of something you're looking at and explain, why.
So it's probably just more due to the nature of whatever the question was.
Yes.
As
That will usually tell you for the year or for the month.
Okay. Thank you.
So the second statement is what's called a statement of retained earnings, or sometimes a retained earnings statement. So recognize that a business, as it earns revenue and incurs expenses, will have net income left over. And some of that income, it may pay out to the owners of the business in the form of something called dividends. That's a dividend, just a payment from the business to the owner. And some of those earnings, the business will retain or hold in the business for future use. Maybe they're going to expand someday, or maybe they're going to build a new building or something like that. So retained earnings just summarizes any retained earnings at the beginning of the period you're measuring, plus any net income you earned, minus any dividends that you paid out to the owners. And that will give you the retained earnings at the end of the period. So that's the statement of retained earnings. Any questions about that one? Let's see. I'll let you read that. I won't insult your intelligence by reading it to you. I always liked those teachers in college that would just like read the slide to me. And I'd say, thanks. You could have just emailed me the slides and saved me the whole class, right? But that's probably a bad attitude. All right. The third financial statement is the balance sheet. The balance sheet, people always think it's called a balance sheet because the balances are the same. So the total of the assets equals the total of liabilities and stockholders' equity. So they say, oh, it balances. And that's a good way to remember it. It's actually called a balance sheet because it shows you the balance of each of your accounts, your asset accounts, your liability accounts, and your stockholder equity accounts. But do recognize that your total assets will equal your total liabilities and stockholders' equity, that those two are always equal. And that gets back to something else you learn in this chapter, the fundamental accounting equation, which is assets equal liabilities plus stockholders' equity. And so they're summarized here: assets, liabilities, stockholders' equity. Assets are things that you own, that a business owns: cash, supplies, equipment. Accounts receivable, this one right here is a little bit more confusing. This is money that's owed to you by your customers. So accounts receivable, money owed to you by customers. And then your liabilities is money that you owe or debts that you owe. They can be notes payable or accounts payable. A note payable is usually a formal loan where you sign a paper saying I agree to pay this much and this much interest rate on it, as opposed to accounts payable, which is an informal loan, usually that arises from a sales transaction. If I buy something from my supplier and he says, you don't have to pay me today, but pay me within 30 days, that's an account payable. Unearned revenue, that's a confusing one. That's a liability. It's confusing because it has revenue in its name, but it's a liability, okay? An unearned revenue is when a customer pays me in advance for services I have not yet rendered. So I get paid, I haven't actually earned the revenue, so I owe the client the services in the future, or I owe them their money back, one or the other. So that's what an unearned revenue is. So that's the liabilities. And then stockholders' equity, this is our common stock. This represents amounts that the owners of the business have contributed into the business. So when a business starts and it needs to buy new equipment, usually the owners will put in money to start. That's the common stock. So money that the owners have contributed. And then retained earnings, that's, if you remember our statement of retained earnings we just talked about, that's any net income that we've earned and haven't paid back out to the owners. That's it. So the stockholders' equity is what the stockholders have paid in plus any earnings of the business. So that's all summarized here on the balance sheet. You'll see the balance sheet will give you just a single date because this doesn't measure a period of time. This isn't the balance sheet for the month of October. This is what are the balance of these asset, liability, and stockholder equity accounts as of this date. Okay. I know that was a lot. Let's see real quick. Someone posted in the chat. Can you post this PowerPoint so we can use it to take notes with? So actually it's in the Wily Plus Read, Study, and Practice information. I'll show you where to find it. Recognize that I pull 5 or 6 or 7 slides out of it, and their slideshow will have a lot more slides. Because I just feel like if I were to try to go through all 70 of their slides, it would be information overload. And we like to keep these meetings at, you know, a reasonable amount of time for people. Anyway, so one more here. And so you'll notice, I don't know if you noticed this before, but let's see. But there's these little red lines here between the statements. What they're showing you is that the net income amount from the income statement is going to flow into the net income line on the statement of retained earnings. That's what this little red line was meant to show you. And then on the balance sheet, the retained earnings from the statement of retained earnings or retained earnings statement will flow into the retained earnings line on the balance sheet. So what they're showing you is that each of these statements is interconnected with each other. All right. Again, these are just some of the things I talked about. Assets equal liabilities plus stockholder equity. That's the fundamental or basic accounting equation. And they're always in this order, with assets listed first, then the liabilities, then the stockholder equity. The last financial statement is the statement of cash flows, which is, it seems simple, and it is in some sense, but it's actually one of the more complex statements, and we'll actually learn way more about it near the end of the course after we have a better grounding, I guess, in accounting principles. But all a statement of cash flows does is it breaks down the amount of cash the business is bringing in into operating activities. So those activities required to run the business day to day, which usually means buying from suppliers, selling to customers, those sorts of things. Investing activities, which means buying long-term assets the business is going to use over time. For example, I own rental storage business. And so when I purchase a building, that's an investing activity. We're going to use it for the next 30 years and lease space to our customers. Or the selling of those assets would also be an investing activity. And then finally, financing activities. This would be things like borrowing from the bank or issuing stock, meaning getting more people to become owners in the business and put money into the business that way. And so it just summarizes the cash flowing in or out of the business from each of those areas. And you'll see that the cash amount on the balance sheet will match up with the cash on the statement of cash flows. So that's kind of a quick overview of the financial statements that are covered in this first chapter. Let me show you where you can find that PowerPoint slideshow. So if you come into the Wily Plus, let's see, whoops, up here. Textbook Access, Wily Plus, Read, Study, and Practice. And then here's your table of contents. So you choose the chapter. So we're in chapter 1. Then I can come down here to Classroom Resources, and there's a PowerPoint review. And that I actually took that PowerPoint straight from there. I just, like I said, cut out a bunch of the slides to just get it down to the ones that I thought would be most valuable to us today. There's Wily Plus gives you tons and tons of stuff, and it's really great, but sometimes it can be almost too much. Like, where do I focus my efforts? Is the question. So now that finishes sort of my basic presentation, and so now I guess it's time for questions. If you started the homework and have questions about a problem there, or if you have questions about a principle from your reading, now would be the time for that. And if you don't, it's okay too. People always feel embarrassed if they don't have questions, like they're a bad person for not having a question, and it's okay. It might mean you haven't had a chance to read, or it might mean you read it and you're solid on it. You feel good. Anyway, questions or thoughts? Criticism?
Can I ask a general question about the homework?
Sure.
With the other system we used last semester, we could go through the homework, and if we didn't get 100, basically, we could go back in and redo it and re-practice until we get the concepts right and get 100. Is this a one-shot deal, or can we go back in and do it a couple of times until we get it? Yeah,
so it's set up so that you get 3 tries per question. And you don't have to redo the whole assignment. You can just redo that question if you want. It's one of the reasons we use Wily Plus, and I use something similar at Eastern Arizona College where I teach full-time, is it used to be that people would do the homework on a piece of paper and turn it into you, and it would take you like a week to grade 30 of those. And then you'd get it back, and by the time they got feedback, we were already moving on to a new concept. And Wily Plus allows you to get immediate feedback and then a chance to try it again with that feedback in mind. So even though it's more expensive in some ways, it's actually as cheap as the textbooks used to be. But people used to be able to find or borrow a textbook. With Wily, everybody has to pay, right? So even though there's that cost, that's the logic behind why they've gone to it. So short answer. Yeah, 3 tries for each question.
Great.
So we also have, Michelle, they have video instruction of similar problems. And I noticed that halfway in, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was doing this on my own. There's videos that shows you a similar problem to help you through it.
Yeah, even linked into the bottom of the problem for a lot of them.
Nice. Okay.
I think also the homework, we were discussing this in our group that met last night. That somebody said that if you click on the show your work, once you're done with the question, then it will show you how to get it once you've exhausted all your opportunities to answer the question. But then it will show you how they got that answer. I haven't done that yet, but that's what I've heard.
Or just get it right by the end of the 3rd one, and then you got it, right? Easy. Right. I think someone else.
From a homework execution perspective, is it the practice portion that's off to the right? I've kind of similar to Michelle. I've seen that I have access to the content. I actually purchased a copy of the paperback as well. So I've been reading from that. But when I'm actually executing the homework, is that what I'm using from the interface there? Is the practice section to the side?
No, that's a good question. So it's actually in the module for each week. There'll be like right here, homework chapter 1, part 1. You click on it. It'll take you to a window that says open it in a new window.
Okay.
But of course, I have another Wily Plus. This is one of the frustrating things about Wily Plus. It doesn't like you to have it open in 2 windows. And so it'll say like, you already have a window open. You're
Okay.
like, maybe I wanted 2 windows open. A workaround to that is, of course, you can log back in either through an incognito tab in Chrome or open a different browser.
Yeah.
Anyway, but sometimes you want to have, some people like to have their textbook up as an example and the homework, which doesn't seem crazy to me that you'd want that. But Wily Plus only allows 1 tab open on a given browser at a time, and I don't know why. Anyway.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I had a question on the, what's it called? The last statement that we do, the cash flows. Is there any good way to tell which ones are finance, which ones are operating?
Yeah, so that's kind of like asking someone, like on the first day of learning to play guitar, like, is there any, easy way to remember the chords? And it's like, well, I always tell people, well, you just, for me, I just do it every day for the last 25 years and you're really good at it. But that's a silly answer, of course. There is an element of like just having to sort of memorize it, but in time it becomes more comfortable where it's like, it feels obvious to you. But I'll give you a couple little pointers that may be helpful. What happened to my PowerPoint? Here it is. So when we're pulling this information from a balance sheet, well, no, that's not going to help for now because we'll get into that more later. But so recognize that operating activities are those activities that are part of the day-to-day operation of the business. So anything that's going to involve money from sales, so revenue, or payments to suppliers for the goods you're selling, or regular expenses, those are the operating activities. And the investing activities are only going to deal with those assets that are long-term. So not stuff that you're going to try to sell, but stuff that's gonna, like buildings and land and heavy equipment or things that you're gonna use for years and years. Is there what? Maybe instead of me trying to just explain it, is there a problem that you were looking at that I could pull up and we could talk through it, and that might help everybody understand it better? One of the homework problems.
It was. I think the second one on the homework 2.
Homework 2.
Wow, I'm super impressed.
I know. That was like a kind of like a low-key right? Like, yeah, well,
sorry, I jumped in.
I'm struggling with the second homework. I know some of you haven't even got started, but no. What do my kids call it? A flex. Like they're like nice flex. I'm not sure. Hold on. Let's find it and take a look at it, and I'll see if I can walk through. And I hope I hope I don't offend you with that teasing.
No, that's fine.
Okay. So let's see. I've closed out of my other Wily Plus window. I'm going to go into week 2, chapter 1, part 2. And you said you thought it was the second one?
I think so.
Okay. So here's a statement of cash flows. And so, yeah, so it gives you this information up here. And then you're supposed to like figure out where it all fits on here, right? And it's kind of overwhelming.
A lot overwhelming.
Yeah. So one tool that's nice is this link to the text, because it'll give you, let's see, that's income statement. Sorry. Balance sheet. statement of cash flows. So it'll give you an example one in there.
Okay.
That help, but it doesn't always match up perfectly. So I'm just going to look at these and say cash received from lenders. That's money I borrowed. And so any borrowing goes under financing. Okay. Cash received from customers, that's getting paid for stuff I sell. So that's going to go under operating. Equipment, that's long-term stuff. So, and again, I know these because I've used these terms forever, and it just takes time to get used to them. But you know, so but any purchases of equipment become an investing activity. Dividends are amounts paid to the owners. So dividends always fall under financing. Cash paid to suppliers is part of my normal operating of a business. And so that's it. So I don't know if I'm helping you with tools to be able to do it again next time rather than just giving you the answer here. But recognize money that you get from customers or pay to suppliers is always operating, okay? Because that's your day-to-day how you run the business. Money used to purchase equipment or other long-term things is investing activities, because that's what we mean by investing, is buying into something that I'm going to use for the next several years, okay? And then money received from borrowing or from issuing stock, or money paid to owners in the form of dividends, those are all part of financing. And so, I mean, really, those are the categories, and that's how it breaks down. Here in the book, let's see, I think there's probably a brief, maybe there's not, a brief explanation of that here, but it's not in depth. Did that help at all or no?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Hey, I wasn't worthless.
This time anyway.
I wasn't worthless like Mom always said I was, right? I don't think she ever called me worthless. I think lazy maybe, but not worthless. That was my mom just trying to motivate me. Let's see. Okay,
I think one thing that I would just, maybe it's just me, but make sure that you know exactly what you're looking for, because then once it starts to ask for things, I kind of got a little bit confused. I don't know how to say it, whether they were asking for assets or liabilities or whatever in the question, because of the way they phrased it, I got a little bit mixed up, and that's where I got one of my questions wrong even after the fourth try, because I kept thinking it was something else that they were asking for. So my suggestion is just make sure you know what the question is asking for.
Yeah, so that's a really great point. Accounting really, really is a subject of attention to detail, attention to wording, and it's particularly problematic for students for whom English is not their first language. You know, I speak Mandarin Chinese not well anymore, and I was pretty good at it at one time in my life, and I do not think I would want to take a college level accounting course in Chinese, just because you're trying to often distinguish between minor variations in terms. So you do have to read the word parts of the questions very carefully to understand what they're asking a lot of times. So that's a really great point. Okay, I think we're hitting a winding down here. Any last questions before we close? Oh, and just FYI, so the meeting I will hold tonight, this evening at 6 p.m. is the exact same meeting. It's just, in other words, you don't have to try to make it to both. I mean, and these, you don't have to make it to any of them. If you find they're valuable, come to them. If they're not valuable to you, then it's okay. I do record them and post the recording. But tonight, again, I was just trying to reach as many time zones as possible for this first meeting, and I'll do one more at the end right before the final, again, where we try to reach as many time zones as possible. And then I've posted that schedule. We'll be doing them at alternating times every other week to try to just have as broad a reach as we can. All right. Well, Michelle gave the opening prayer. Anybody willing to offer a closing prayer?
I'll give the closing prayer.
Great, thank you.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for the opportunity to be able to take these classes and for technology, which allows us to do so. We're grateful for Brother Fox and for his insights, and pray that that will help us, Father, that our minds might be open, that we might be able to be receptive and be able to retain and learn those things which will be helpful in this course. We're grateful, Father, for all that thou hast provided for us and for the joy that the gospel brings into our lives. And we pray that thou will bless us each this day, that we will be able to accomplish and do those things which thou would have us, and that we might look for those opportunities to serve those around us. And these things we say in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Great. Have a great day, everybody. Like I said, I will post the video of this in the announcements section, and maybe I'll make a page, and I'll put down in that student resources at the bottom, just to make it easy for people to go back if they ever want to watch an older one or something. Anyway, have a great day.
Thank you.
Good luck in the course.
Brother Fox, you
Yeah.
remind me so much of my brother. It's like creeping me out.
Sorry.
It's fine. I just keep wanting to be a smart mouth to you because that's my natural tendency with my older brothers.
And you let your guard down when it feels familiar. Yeah.
So don't take offense.